Good evening, everyone. Rabbi Weinberg was a very unique individual. And he was a person that had influence far beyond his personage. It's not only the hundreds, if not thousands of students, and not only this magnificent institution, and not only all of the branches of Aish Torah which exist all over the world, but generally, even for people who never saw this building or never saw Rabbi Weinberg, he was a presence. He had an effect upon people. And that's true of all of the great teachers of the Jewish people, is that they are never limited to their audience, so to speak, but that they have a far, far greater influence. And sometimes the influence is not seen until generations later. The Jewish people, we always play a long-term game. We want to see how things will look later. Yaakov Avinu said, Mochor ovo al schori. Tomorrow, let's see what it looks like. And the problem with much of society today is that it only deals in today. What I want now, what's better for me now, it's always now. But now is fleeting. And we are here to deal with eternity. We are here to deal with what it'll look like later. What will your grandchildren look like? So nobody here looks to me like they're going to have grandchildren immediately. But believe me, before you turn around, so I remember that when my first grandchild was born, so I started to behave myself because I want my grandchildren to have a high opinion of me. God forbid, if you go on the cemetery, you'll see no one has written on their tombstone that I got the last nickel out of the deal. That's not how we want to be remembered. We want to be remembered in terms of eternity. And that was a lesson that Rabbi Weinberg was able to impart to generations that somehow didn't have the opportunity to be connected to eternity, but felt that it had to happen, that they had to be bound to it. So I want to, for the few moments that I'm going to speak to you, for me it's a few moments, for you it'll feel longer, I'm certain. Let's talk about the greatest teacher of all of humankind, our teacher Moshe Rabbeinu. And all teachers in Israel over all of the centuries have attempted to emulate Moshe, or at least to be a piece of Moshe, because Moshe is eternity. Zichru Toras Moshe Avdi. The Navi said 1,000 years after him, remember the Torah of Moshe, my servant. And when we hear the Torah being read in your mind's eye and imagination, you should remember and feel that Moshe is talking to you. And I think that that's part of the reason why the Torah told us that Moshe's face shone to such a degree that no one could look at him. If you couldn't look at him, then you have to hear what he had to say. It was a different Moshe. So how does he become Moshe Rabbeinu? So the Torah tells us a simple narrative. So first of all, he's got the ideal resume of a yeshiva student. He's working for his father-in-law. He's a shepherd. Now the Torah tells us that there was a bush that was burning. There's a bush that is burning in fire. And this bush, even though it's burning in fire, is never consumed. It never turns to ashes. The fire never goes out. So the Kotzker Rebbe, the famous Rebbe Menachem Mendel Morgenstern, who was a shrewd observer of human nature, so he said, and he says in a few places regarding incidents in the Torah, he says, for instance, by Avraham Avinu, when it said, Lech Lecha, go to Eretz Yisrael. So he said it wasn't speaking only to Avraham. Everybody heard it, but Avraham is the one that did something about it. The Lech Lecha is out there for everybody. So to speak, God really doesn't play favorites. It's out there for everyone, and everyone picks up what they want. So this bush is burning for everybody. And there are other shepherds that go by the bush. Other people go by the bush all the time. And they say to themselves, look at that. The bush is burning. It was burning yesterday. It was burning 2 days ago. How interesting. But they keep on going because they're busy. They have carpool. They got to go shopping. Life intrudes. So they saw a wondrous thing, but in terms of eternity, it made no impression upon them. Moshe goes by the bush, and the Torah records for us that Moshe said, Osura no vo'ere samare hagodol hazeh madua lo yivar hasner. I'm going to stop and look at this. The bush is burning, and it's not consumed. I'm going to stop. It's worthy of investigation. It's worth my time to examine this and be curious about it. So in the Torah it says, how does he become Moshe? So it doesn't say that Moshe, said the Hadron at the Sea of Mashas. It says, Vayar Hashem kisor liros. God saw that someone stopped. Someone took the time and noticed it. That's the beginning of greatness. The beginning of greatness is to notice things. How come the Jewish people are 3,700 years old? Where's everybody else? What happened to all of them? Why are we here? How did we get back to the land of Israel? 100 years ago, there were 16,000 Jews in the country, and there were 2.5 million Arabs. How come? But nobody stops. Worse than that, they take a history course which explains how come, but that it misses the whole point. They once asked in Berlin, Berlin was once a great Jewish city. I mean, there's a great deal of irony in our world. So in Berlin, there were two great institutions of learning across the street from each other. One was das Wissenschaft des Judentums, the scientific study of Judaism, which was scholarly, reform, PhD, well-financed. And across the street, there was a yeshiva. It was called Hildesheimer's. Israel Hildesheimer was the Rosh Yeshiva. Later, Rabbi David Hoffman was the Rosh Yeshiva. So the legend is that a student once came to Hildesheimer and he said he has a choice which side of the street to go on. Which institution should he go to? And he said, Rabbi Hildesheimer, can you explain to me what's the difference between the two institutions? They're both institutions of higher learning. They're both institutions of knowledge. They both have great teachers. So Hildesheimer could have said the difference is the food, but he didn't. He said, listen, if you want to know what color shirt Rashi wore, you got to go across the street. If you want to know Rashi, you got to come here. And that remains true until today. If you want to know what color shirt Rashi wore, you go to the Hebrew University. You want to know Rashi, so you have to sit and sweat over a piece of Gemara, and Rashi holds your hands like your mother crossing a busy street. Then you know Rashi. Because Rashi's eternity. And in eternity, it really doesn't make a difference what color shirt you wore. So God said, oh, somebody stopped and noticed. The moment he stopped and noticed, the angel called out to him and said, Moshe, Moshe, I got a job for you. Moshe doesn't want the job. Who wants to be the leader of the Jewish people? We want to be the prime minister, but not the leader. But Moshe says, why me? Shlachna b'yad tishlach. You got plenty of other guys. Send them. What are you sending me for? And he says, I can't speak well. I stutter. I have an accent. I've been away from the Jewish people for decades. There's a murder warrant out for me by Pharaoh. I'm not the man. So it's very interesting that the Lord does not accept excuses. People do. My Rebbe in the yeshiva always used to say, he would say, well, why aren't you prepared? So he had a good excuse, this, I didn't feel well, I had a lot of homework, I overslept. So the Rebbe always used to say, those are great excuses, but no excuse equals doing it. And that's the standard that the Lord holds us to. He's not interested in why. He's interested, are you trying? Would you like to do it? Where's your effort? So Moshe doesn't want it. So I have often wondered, the Gemara tells us that Moshe is not, the Ibn Ezra says it specifically, that Moshe is not a Hebrew name. I drew him forth from the waters. The verb mishisihu, he said, has Egyptian roots to it. It's not pure Hebrew. And Moshe is therefore an Egyptian name. Now Moshe had Jewish names. Beautiful names. Tuvia, Vered, Gamliel. List 7 names that Moshe had that were given to him at his Brit. So how come the Torah is not Frum? Why does the Torah call him Jeffrey? Why did he call him Tuvia? And all of his life and forever, he's going to be remembered as Moshe. And the other names appear, and you'll study Medrash and everything. You'll learn the names, but he's never known by that. Yekusiel, beautiful names. So when I first came to Israel, it's over 50 years ago. You can do a lot when you start young. So there was a family in Los Angeles that I knew, Spiegel, and they were Holocaust survivors. And the father and the mother and the 5-year-old son were taken to Auschwitz in the last month of its operation. And the father and mother survived, but the little boy did not survive. And after the war, the Spiegels came to Los Angeles, the Beverly Hills, and like many Holocaust survivors, they rebuilt themselves, they had other children, and he made a lot of money, Spiegel. He owned banks, and he made a lot of money. But he was haunted by his 5-year-old child. So he came to Yad Vashem here in Yerushalayim, and he gave them initially $5 million. This is when $5 million was money. And he said he wants to build a museum in memory of the 1.5 million Jewish children under the age of 12 that were destroyed in World War II. The whole generation that is not here. And that's why we look the way we look. So they agreed. And then eventually he gave them another $9 million. And they built what they called the Children's Museum. You can see it if you have a chance to go to Yad Vashem and see the Children's Museum. So I was in Jerusalem on the day that the museum was opened and dedicated. So I thought to myself, I'll go and see what Spiegel did here. Now, I've seen Holocaust museums all over the world. I know what I'm going to see. A room full of hair, a room full of shoes, a room full of toys, a room full of suitcases. I know all of that already. I'm almost immune to it. And therefore, I was completely surprised by what the museum actually was. Because you walk into a room that's a little larger than this, but it's as tall as this magnificent base medrash. And it's pitch black. It is so dark that initially you cannot put one foot in front of the other. You have to hold on to the handrails. After a few minutes, when your eyes begin to adjust slightly to the darkness, you notice that there are little pinpoints of light throughout the room. And this is caused by the genius of the designer. There's a candle in the middle of the room, and through the reflection of metal and mirrors and water and everything. So you've got all these pinpoints of light throughout the room, and actually every pinpoint of light represents a Jewish child's soul. And then there is a recording, a tape that plays. And the tape does nothing but say names. Hannah Greenberg, 3 years old, Vilna. Joseph Goldberg, 7 years old, Germany. Names. Names, 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 till you can bear it no longer. And as I ran out of this black room into the blinding Jerusalem sunlight, I thought to myself for the first time, you know, my name is not on the tape. I'm of the age. They met me. My cousins that remain in Lithuania, their names are on the tape. I, by an accident of history, was born in Chicago. My name is not on the tape. And then I thought to myself, if my name is not on the tape, then I'm going to try and do something for the Jewish people. I'm spared for a purpose. It isn't just blind luck. And I've tried in my meager way over the years to help Jews and to help the Jewish people and the Jewish state. Moshe says, no, not me. God says to him, what's your name? Moshe? Why are you called Moshe? Because I took you out of the Nile. I saved you from the crocodiles. Don't tell me, no, I'm not going. Moshe, Moshe. And for that, Moshe has no answer. The Jewish people have always possessed individuals who felt that they were saved and that they are here for a purpose. Rabbi Weinberg was certainly one of those individuals. He tried to save hundreds and thousands of Moshes from the waters of assimilation, from the crocodiles of ideas that eat us up and make us look foolish. And therefore, he was a disciple of Moshe. Now, all of us are disciples of Moshe. Rabbi Goldvicht, who drove me here, my colleague in the Rabbonis, he asked me if I would repeat a story to you, with which I'm going to conclude. In 1946, I was alive then. No, I don't know if anybody else here was, but I was. I remember it because it was the last year that the Cubs were in the World Series until 2016. If you don't know that, then you're useless. So, in 1946, after Jewish people were on the floor, I mean, I cannot tell you how terrible it was for us. The British are running wild here in the country. The Arabs are rioting. Europe is a graveyard. There are 250,000 refugees that no country wants to take in. So Rabbi Herzog, who was then the chief rabbi, then it was Palestine, later he was the first chief rabbi of the state of Israel, a great Gaon and tzaddik. So I remember he came to Chicago. And he spoke to us in the yeshiva. I was before bar mitzvah yet. And the whole yeshiva was maybe 200 bochurim. I was, I think, 11 and a half. And the oldest one was 25. And that was it. That was the whole Midwest. That was Kansas City and Minneapolis and St. Louis and Milwaukee and Cleveland. That was it. And he said as follows. He said, I just came from the Pope of Rome. It was Pius XII then. And he said, and I gave the Pope a list with 10,000 names of Jewish children who were sequestered in Catholic institutions during the war to save them from extermination, so their parents gave them over to these Catholic institutions. And he said, I hope that you'll give me the children back to their parents, to whoever survived, to the Jewish people. And the Pope told me, he said, that he would not do so, because anyone that was taken into a Catholic institution was immediately baptized. And anyone that's baptized in the Christian faith cannot be handed over to be raised in a different faith. And after he said that, he put his head down on the lectern and he wept. I had never seen a grown man weep like that. It wasn't the Holocaust, it was the whole 2,000 years poured out of him. And then he raised himself and he looked around the room at all of us. And he said, I cannot do anything more for those 10,000 children. But what are you going to do to build the Jewish people? What are you going to do? And later on, as we all passed by him to shake his hand and receive his blessing, he said, remember what I said. Don't forget what I said. I've been a rabbi a long time, over 6 decades. The Jewish people are a hard people. We couldn't have survived otherwise. And the nudniks can make you crazy. And there are days when I said, I got enough of this, right? I have a law degree. I don't need this. I don't need, a lady to come up and tell me I didn't like what you said on Shabbos. And every time that I thought that way, I heard Rabbi Herzog in my ear. So Rabbi Herzog speaks to all of us. What are you going to do? Rabbi Weinberg speaks to all of us. Moshe speaks to all of us. So eternity speaks to us. And that is our task, no matter what you do in life. Your task is to build eternity. In your family, in your profession, in your community, here in Israel certainly, but wherever we find ourselves. Because that is what makes us the Jewish people. That's why we are here. And that's why we'll be privileged to be here, to see greater and good times, not only for us, but for all of humankind, and to be blessed to be the true disciples of Moshe Rabbeinu and of his successors and of Rabbi Weinberg as well. Thank you. Kol Tuv Selah.